So a lot of things have happened. A lot, thousands. Okay, thousands of memos I could easily create. And you can see them here. But what I'm getting at here is, we'll start with Chicago. Okay, and that is a thing in of itself. Okay, and the applicability to Brian, the hundreds of stories in that alone, probably at least dozens, if not probably dozens, maybe not hundreds, but dozens for sure. But very detrimental dozens of stories. Okay, which is one of the reasons I never recommend anybody ever go to, invest in, or take money in or out of Chicago or the state of Illinois. You will never, for the rest of my life, ever. Okay, this goes, by the way, this goes back to Brian's youth. That's how far back the earliest pre-Obama era bullshit started occurring. Believe it, when Brian was like 11, 12 years old. Okay, I kid you not, man. It started out. Here's where it's. This is when they moved. When Brian was 8 years old, they moved from childhood residence 1 to childhood residence 2. Well, at about 3 or 4 years in, at that childhood residence 2, they had Brian intercept a female. Okay. Whose first 5 letters was Court, Court. Okay. Pre-Obama era. Okay. Keep that in mind. Furthermore, they took a visit to Toronto to go see Showboat, the musical, whatever, on stage. Showboat, Chicago. Anyways. Those were some of the earliest. Then there were additional changes just prior to Richard Wishaw's death, where over a period of years, so if you backtrack prior to 2006, those last 5 years of his life, he started shifting to Richard Wishaw grew up as a machine builder in America. Okay, he started out basically blue collar, made his way to a white collar quality control position more or less, was not wealthy other than his name. Okay, but there was more going on to that than at the superficial level, which is an important factor for a lot of things. Okay, because it's the same thing with Brian. So he was Richard 1, Brian is Brian Richard Wishaw, Richard 2. Okay. What I'm getting at was the applicability of that to China at the end of the day. Okay. Richard Wishaw was a very American person that sourced, because he was a machine builder, sourced American tools and whatever else, pro-American all day long. Okay. But then those last few years, just prior to his death, he started sourcing like Harbor Freight, Chinese, Chicago Electric, whatever crap. I'm like, oh, disposable shit. And like, what? Huh? Like, it was always a weird, awkward feeling for Brian. He kind of looked at it and he goes, man, something's not right here. The thousands of other things that weren't right as well. That was one of them. Those were the subtle, the real. In fact, they even reminded Brian with that in 2011, when they had already, via proxy parties, had already adversely manipulated his own family members, the critical family members around him, notably his mother, where he couldn't even have basic conversations with his own mother. Okay, you could see it, smell it. You could pick up on it like 2 seconds. You're like, man, she's not acting right. Something's horribly wrong. But anyways, what I'm getting at, and the reason I bring up stuff like that, that is an important family office factor, and I just want to note that that's an important factor for behavioral monitoring, by the way. So in terms of security, like when I had to go back and redevelop, and I said, here's this and that in terms of the security aspect for the family office, there's a couple factors of that, and how things have to be monitored and why they do. That's one of them. That is a critical factor in terms of behavioral changes in people. Okay, and you have to on a ongoing level, continuously monitor for those things. AI has helped with some of it, but you still have to be cognizant of just the general psychology behind it, because those are real changes. Okay, it's the equivalent of you're dealing with what they would the street lingo would be, oh, you're getting played or you're dealing with a player. Okay, like back in the day, like especially like on the African American side of things, you're like, oh, he's a player, man. He thinks he's hot shit. He's with this and that. That's what Brian was dealing with. Okay, at that level of things. Okay. And it comes down to proxy manipulation. It's often interwoven with narcissistic and whatever other behavior, narcissistic and extreme psychotic behaviors as well. And Brian experienced a lot of that, but that's slightly beside the point, almost. But some of the there was other very, very small details. Like the pre-China, as things were still building up and still transferring out to